Хотим поздравить Словению с завершением председательства в Совете в сентябре, объективно непростом месяце для любого председателя.
Madam President, we would like to congratulate Slovenia on the completion of the presidency of the Council in September, an objectively difficult month for any presidency, and Switzerland on assuming the presidency of the Council in October. We thank the Secretary General for his assessment of the situation in the Middle East, which has sharply deteriorated against the backdrop of an unprecedented escalation of violence in Lebanon and the expansion of the geography of confrontation to its neighbors in the region. We also took into account the positions of Israel and Iran as set out in the letter circulated the day before. Unfortunately, the Middle East region is literally sliding into the abyss of a new big war before our eyes, and the Security Council is only watching helplessly. The inhumane Israeli military operation in Gaza continues, despite the demands of the overwhelming majority of the international community to stop it. Predictably, the spiral of violence has led to an aggravation of the situation in the Lebanese-Israeli border area, in Yemen and the Red Sea. However, instead of using the possibilities of diplomacy, the authorities in Jerusalem have made an unequivocal bet on the use of force to stop their concerns. And their American accomplices play along with them in everything, paralyzing the work of the Security Council. As a result, Lebanon became a new victim of the Israeli military machine. After intensive shelling of Lebanese cities, the southern neighbor launched a ground operation in this country. In addition, after a series of political liquidations, including the assassination of the head of the Hamas Executive Council, Ismail Haniyeh, Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, and a number of other leaders of the anti-Israel movements, Iran also joined the confrontation, showing exceptional restraint in these circumstances for 2 whole months. From the statements of our Western colleagues, one gets the impression that the only problem facing the Council today is the response to the Iranian missile strike. It is difficult to imagine what role in the diplomatic process with such an assessment of the situation can be counted on, as if all this happened in a vacuum, as if nothing is happening and has not happened in Lebanon, Gaza, Syria, and Yemen, which has led to a new dangerous round of the growing Middle East conflict. Russia strongly condemns the attack on Lebanon and calls on the Israeli authorities to immediately cease military actions and withdraw troops from Lebanese territory. We see no excuses for new civilian casualties, which are already in the thousands. We express solidarity with the leadership and people of friendly Lebanon, which has been subjected to armed aggression. We sincerely condolence to the families and friends of the victims. We demand the full and comprehensive implementation of UNSC Resolution 1701, which contains both Israel's obligations to cease all offensive military operations, withdraw its armed forces from southern Lebanon, and end the occupation of Lebanese territories, and Hezbollah's obligations to withdraw units north of the Litani River. The Israeli side must strictly ensure the security of the UN interim force in Lebanon, which is exposed to unpredictable risks in connection with the Israeli invasion. We remind you that a threat to the life and health of blue helmets may constitute a war crime. We also strongly condemn the murder of Khalifa Nasrallah. It is repugnant that more than 81-ton bombs were dropped on a residential area of the Lebanese capital to eliminate it. As a result, 6 multi-story buildings were destroyed. What kind of selectivity of this action can we talk about in such circumstances? This political dismantling is fraught with catastrophic consequences for Lebanon and the entire Middle East. Jerusalem could not but understand this, but deliberately escalated it. Thus, the Israeli side bears full responsibility for the ensuing escalation and its consequences, including for the population of Israel. As part of its mandate to maintain international peace and security, the UN Security Council must force Israel to immediately cease hostilities. We must also make every effort to create conditions for a political and diplomatic settlement. In this context, we note Tehran's signal that it does not want to further unwind the spiral of confrontation. Madam President, recently, the UN Security Council has been often and rightly criticized for its inability to stop violence in the zone of Palestinian-Israeli confrontation. At the same time, those who follow our work know very well that 14 out of 15 members of the Security Council would have long ago taken the necessary measures to force the parties to peace, thus saving the lives of thousands of innocent women, children, and the elderly. And Israel would not have been able to act so brazenly and disregarding international law if it did not feel under the unconditional and all-weather protection of the United States. For the sake of its Middle Eastern ally, Washington has already used the right of veto in the Security Council 5 times, and since the beginning of July has been deliberately trying to lead us all by the nose, advertising its notorious Biden plan and its quiet diplomacy to conclude a deal between Hamas and Israel. To be honest, all this gives a strong impression that Washington is conducting these indirect negotiations with itself. It is therefore very symbolic that the Israeli Prime Minister gave the command to eliminate the leader of Hezbollah and start the most dangerous round of regional escalation from New York, having previously made an emphatically militaristic speech from the rostrum of the UN General Assembly. Dear colleagues, this is the kind of sung duet we are really dealing with. And the question, of course, is not only about moral and political support, but also about the multi-billion-dollar arms deliveries that Washington continues to ship to Israel as if nothing had happened, despite the extermination of 42,000 Palestinians, who, of course, does not need any mediation efforts and continues its inhumane campaign. As a result, the flames of the all-consuming conflict are spreading wider, absorbing more and more of Israel's neighbors in the region. The great and most dangerous illusion is that Israel will be able to escape unscathed in this growing fire. This flame is already consuming the lives of the remaining Israeli hostages, and in West Jerusalem, they pretend that all this is part of their plan. At the same time, they neglected public opinion in Israel itself. Madam President, another dangerous illusion is that Israel, with its significant military superiority, plans to deal with the crisis it provoked on its own. It is becoming increasingly obvious that the Israeli leadership plans to provoke a direct conflict between its main regional adversary, Iran, and the United States at any cost. It is difficult to say whether Washington understands this, but so far this play is being played out according to Israeli notes. And if it reaches the end, the conflict could reach an unimaginable level of escalation, threatening not only the Middle East, but the entire world. We are convinced that it is in our common interest to prevent such a scenario. I would like to believe that our American colleagues will finally see the light and will be fully aware of their responsibility as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. Madam President, we believe that the only way out of the current situation in the Middle East is to use all the extensive tools available to our Council that make it possible to effectively seek an end to conflicts and the implementation of existing UN Security Council resolutions. Any other initiatives will be palliative in nature and will not bring the desired effect. We see no alternative to forcing the parties to the conflict to immediately establish a ceasefire in Gaza, accompanied by the exchange of hostages and prisoners and the organization of full and unhindered humanitarian access to the enclave. This will lay the foundation for the relaunch of the process of peaceful settlement of the Palestinian question on an internationally recognized basis, which is based on the two-state solution, which we all invariably support. The second vector of our efforts is also obvious: an immediate ceasefire in southern Lebanon, and in general the refusal of all direct or indirect parties to the conflict to use force, provocations, and hate speech.
или косвенных участников
Madam President,
от силовых шагов провокации.
today's news about the UN Secretary General's declaration of persona non grata in Israel is an unheard of and extremely boorish decision. This is a slap in the face not only to the UN but to all of us. We call on Council members and UN members to respond to this outrageous step. I repeat, the Council has the necessary tools to solve these problems. The only question is whether there is political will, and we have it. And what about you? We urge everyone to answer this question as soon as possible. Thank you for your attention.
А она у нас есть. А у вас? Призываем всех как можно скорее дать ответ на этот вопрос. Благодарю вас.